We're talking about entrepreneurs this evening. Our guest in the studio, Malik Fal, the MD of Endeavour. Nice to have you with us, Malik.
Thank you very much.
You're a non-profit organisation, but just tell us, what exactly do you do? What are your objectives?
Sure. So Endeavour is a non-profit, as you just mentioned. It is based in New York. And it has a presence in about 11 countries now, sort of large emerging markets, so Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Turkey, and other big emerging markets. Our mission is to promote what we call high-impact entrepreneurship. So Endeavour believes that what's going to transform those emerging markets is to have more and better, up-and-coming companies that have a chance to sort of transform the industries and really create wealth for the communities. So Endeavour is about finding those gems, and we believe that every of such countries have those gems, and also helping the entrepreneurs who are starting those companies to help them scale to the next level and become, in the case of South Africa, the next Discoveries or the next one merchant banks of those countries. So that's what we do.
When you say every country has those gems, how do you go about identifying them?
There's a very involved what we call search and selection process. So part of the team of Endeavour South Africa does nothing else but trying to find those gems. So we find them through lots of different means. Our board of directors, for example, are well-connected business leaders who would refer companies to us. Sometimes in the press, sometimes with show like yours, for example, we would come across an interesting company, we would research it and make contact with the entrepreneur. Sometimes entrepreneurs are self-nominated. They would sort of go on our website and sort of ask to join the selection process of Endeavour. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of different ways. We also have what we call pipeline partners. So other organizations that work with entrepreneurs who know us, who know our criteria, would sort of refer companies to us and say, look, you should look at those guys. Maybe they could be a good fit for Endeavour. And then we would put them into a very rigorous selection process.
How long have you guys been operating in South Africa?
2004. It's been a while.
So it's been a while.
It's been a while, yes.
And have you had success stories?
Of course, yes. I mean, South Africa is a very interesting country in the sense that it's several economies in one, you could say. And over the years, in the past, almost every decade, South Africa produces great up-and-coming companies. And it hasn't changed. I mean, every year we find great companies. We selected a couple actually in November last year in Cape Town. Just recently, 4 great companies that we think have a great potential.
Now, you mentioned November, so I'm going to go back to November.
Sure.
The State of Entrepreneurs in South Africa, it was a conference that you held in Cape Town. Right. The one thing that struck me in the title, The State of Entrepreneurs in South Africa, is that word state. Where does the state fit in here?
Well, actually, it's a misnomer because in the context of the title, the state was about how is entrepreneurship doing in South Africa.
I'm taking that one word and changing it. Do you work closely with government?
Not close enough. No, we don't. We primarily focus on the private sector around finding those companies, and our core activities, as I mentioned earlier, is about supporting them. So we have a program. Once the companies are admitted in the program, after this process that I just described, they have access to a myriad of services that relate to the person, the entrepreneurs themselves, in terms of mentorship, in terms of skills development and other things, as well as the business. So for example, we have partners who would work with the entrepreneurs on a strategic project, for example. Say an entrepreneur, a South African entrepreneur is trying to expand into Latin America, for example. We would assign or work with some of our consulting partners who would do a very detailed study, a plan of expansion for that entrepreneur in Latin America. Sometimes, because we have offices in those countries as well, we would connect them with our network in those countries to help facilitate and execute the programs. So when we talk about the state, your question about the government, we think that the government has a key role to play, obviously, in developing entrepreneurship from a policy standpoint. And that's why in November, that's why we organized this annual conference. The one that we had this past November was the second conference. We had one in 2009 as well. And the idea is to sort of once a year bring all the different stakeholders, including government. We had some government representative in November, and discuss what's working and what's not working with regard to entrepreneurship in South Africa. And then we document all those discussions into a white paper that was released last week.
Just been released.
Yeah.
Just to stick for a moment with government, how are we, from an entrepreneur's point of view, how are we over-regulated? What's the regulatory status? Well,
there's a couple of things. In terms of there's different ways to look at entrepreneurship. First of all, the main measure is an index that is called the TEA index, which is total entrepreneurial activity. So what basically it is, it looks like in any given country, the percent of the active population, so people between 18 and 54, who are entrepreneurs. And it's a very interesting indication of how entrepreneurial a country is, right? South Africa has been stuck in that, on the TEA index, at about between 4 and 6%, pretty much in the past 10 years, right? How does that compare to other emerging markets? Brazil is at 15%. India is at 14%, right? And if you take what we call low and middle income countries, the average is 11%.
So we're lagging
so
badly.
South Africa is lagging badly behind.
Why?
Lots of different factors. So one of them that you alluded to is policy, as you said. So for example, some of the regulations, some of the steps to open a business in South Africa are still too cumbersome compared to other countries, a little bit too much, too bureaucratic. That's one issue. The second issue is that there is a cultural impediment as well. So South Africa has a pretty well-developed corporate environment, you know, and a lot of people, you know, basically go naturally to find a job, you know, regular job, and work for, you know, most of their career and then retire. And the entrepreneurial route is not yet, you know, as sexy, as exciting as it should be. And so that's one of the second impediment. The third impediment is what we call, which is an issue that was discussed extensively in Cape Town, is the issue of funding, which is always an issue all over the world, but in South Africa particularly, there are structural issues around funding early stage businesses that are very severe, that is impacting that.
But to come in on that, I think it was Paul Harris who said at that conference, who was quoted at that conference, that something like 70% of all small businesses fail.
Yeah.
So you can understand the banks, from a corporate point of view, being very reluctant to start handing out money.
Absolutely. That was I mean, Paul was great in bringing everyone to sort of the realities of what a bank should be, which is primarily guaranteeing depositors' funding.
Yeah.
But the issue is not around the banks, because that's one of the problem. The problem is that to fund early stage entrepreneurship, the banks are not the best suited institutions to do that. Other countries have, you know, other type of institutions that are more geared towards funding early stage businesses, such as venture capital funds, angel investing funds. That's where the gap is in South Africa. Those groupings, those institutions, are barely present in South Africa, and that's where the problem lies. Because what happens is that, say, when you start a business, there's sort of a trajectory of business creation. Okay. So Jeremy, let's say you have a burning idea that you've been thinking about for many, many years. You, depending on what type of business it is, but let's say it's a prototype, or, you know, something that can sort of cook for, you know, like a robot, a cooking robot, for example. Right. That works for me. So as an example, so you would sort of build a prototype. You would sort of gather your savings, build a prototype of that robot, right? And then you would sort of see that the robot works, right? Then after proving the sort of technical viability of the product, you would sort of start building a couple of robots, but more on a sort of workshop artisan way. So you don't have a factory yet to build your robots, but you would sort of, you know, go to your friends, go to your family, find people you know, and come up with, I don't know, R500,000 or R1 million.
From friends and family.
Yeah. Well, if you have good friends and family.
I was going to say, my father said to me, never borrow from friends or family.
But you know, that proves whether you believe in the viability of the product or not. But if you're an entrepreneur and you have that burning sense that you're creating something that's useful for humanity, you will find the money to sort of start proving the concept is what we call it, right? So you would sort of have a workshop, employ a few people to build 4 or 5 robots, robots every year or every month, whatever the case may be. And then you prove the concept. People buy the few robots that you managed to create, and then the concept is proven, right? When the concept is proven, that's where things begin to be difficult, because that's why we call, that's why you go as an entrepreneur in what we call the no man's land, or people call it the missing middle. Because now you need a more important injection of capital in order to automate and scale your production, right? So this is usually when if friends and family won't work anymore. That's when you
because they've got a limited amount of cash.
That's right. So that's when you need much more cash, right? Okay. And that's why you have no one to help you, typically, because then the banks will tell you, this is one of the discussions that came up, the banks will say, well, Jeremy, this is great, you've proven the concept, we like the product, but what's your cash flow? How much cash have you generated from that business? And you tell them, well, I haven't really generated much cash because I haven't been able to scale. And I need to borrow money, or I need some equity, or to sell some shares in order to build a factory that can produce 50 robots per day. And that's where the problem lies.
It's almost like somebody going along to apply for a job.
Yeah.
They've just finished university, and the person says to them, we need some experience, and they go, well, if you don't hire me, I can't get experience, and nobody will hire me. So it's the same situation.
That's precisely that.
Yeah.
And that's why what Paul was talking about, there's another point that is in the paper, because Paul was on both sides of the fence, being a banker, but also being someone who's interested in entrepreneurship. Yeah. He was cautioning people about having too much expectations from the banking sector for the reasons you mentioned. 70% of companies fail. It's irresponsible for banks to lend aggressively, to sort of young, untested entrepreneurs. They lend to corporates and so on. But the solution to the problem is what I talked about before, which is the venture capital community or the angel investing community. What does that mean? It means people like Paul and other high net worth individuals coming together, putting together a couple of million rands and saying, you know what, every 6 months we're going to identify 6 Jeremys, 6 companies at that stage that we believe in. We will invest in those companies. Out of the 10 companies that we invest in every 6 months, maybe 8 will fail, or 3 will succeed, and 7 will fail, right? But the 3 that will succeed so well.
That will actually make that money back.
That in 3 years, when we're ready to sell our shares in these companies, we're going to make our money back 10 times over. That's what's missing.
There are certain sectors that you identified at that conference, and I want to start looking at some of those, because maybe you fall into that, into one of those sectors, and it's maybe something that you're interested in doing, and you have that robot that can cook. I must think about that, actually.